This question comes in from one of my regular viewers on YouTube. Llewellyn writes in with the following question. TJ, who do you think are some of the best and most competent speakers today, and why? Well, I'm going to give some examples. I'll either offend everyone or fair-minded people will say I'm being fair. I'm going to give examples from across the spectrum. Let's start at the far right. Rush Limbaugh is a great speaker. You might not agree with his politics. You might not like all of his tactics. But here's a guy who has spoken to millions of people for 3 hours a day, every day, for almost 30 years. Now, I'm not a regular listener to him these days. I occasionally listen. I do remember the first time I heard him. I was hosting a radio show on one of the original 66 stations that carried Rush Limbaugh way back in 1988. I started hosting the show in '89, and let's just say Rush's radio career did a little better than mine. He is a talent in that he can just talk to himself for hours. He doesn't need guests. He doesn't need call-ins, although he does take them. And he can sound conversational, interesting, and believable, and occasionally humorous. He used to be a lot more humorous than he is now. But in the early years, 88 to 92, 94, really compelling. And you know what? He's still the kingpin of talk radio. So I rank him very high as a speaker. Continuing along the spectrum, the ideological spectrum, Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly is very different from Rush Limbaugh, not quite as doctrinaire, not quite as knee-jerk Republican on every issue, although probably 80% solid Republican conservative. He does come across more as the newsman and as someone who isn't trying to actively be a conservative Republican. And you cannot argue with his success. The #1 rated cable TV news show, and not for the last quarter or the last year or the last couple of years, but we're going on like 15 years, folks. It's a long, long time to be #1. Again, I don't necessarily buy into his ideological perspective. You don't have to. But his ability to string together ideas, project a worldview, have a narrative, have the right mix of actually having some real interviews and listening, also some showmanship, some theatrics, using other guests as a punching bag. He is a master communicator. And when you look at his massive success, I know the question's about best speaker, but you have to give Bill O'Reilly credit for also being wildly successful as an author with all of his Killing series. Moving along the spectrum, let's go sort of in the middle of things, someone not particularly ideological, Howard Stern. Again, Howard isn't I've listened to him before, of course, who hasn't, but I'm not a regular fan. But the idea that he can just talk for hour after hour after hour, for decade after decade, on a daily basis and keep people interested, that's not an easy thing to do. Most folks, you put a microphone in front of them, and after about 7 minutes, they'd be like, I got nothing. I got nothing else to say. And Howard Stern can talk hour after hour, day after day, for decades, and still keep people engaged. That's good public speaking, folks. Moving further along is someone purely in sort of the Democratic left of center position, Bill Clinton. Pound for pound, no better public speaker in the world. I don't know why I say pound to pound. It doesn't mean anything, especially since Bill Clinton has lost so much weight. But Bill Clinton is still, I think, if you strip the politics out of it, if you don't happen to like his politics, is the best public speaker in the English-speaking world today, even though some say, oh, he's not quite as good as he used to be. I don't see that. Moving further along, looking at someone more overtly liberal, I would say a couple of the hosts, not many, but a couple of the hosts on MSNBC, I do think Lawrence O'Donnell comes across as urbane, insightful, and fair-minded and intelligent. That's very much a personal preference. So those are some of my speakers, Llewellyn. I'd love to hear from you. The problem, of course, is if you're judging someone on giving a pure keynote speech, so many people just can't see most of the speakers, so it's harder to judge. So I've used more media figures. And those who do see set speeches were kind of limited to the political realm. There were great speeches at both Republican and Democratic conventions in 2016 and 2012. To me, the standout speaker in 2012 at the Republican convention was Ted Cruz, which is the first time I had ever really seen him. Fantastic speech. There are good speakers everywhere. There are bad speakers everywhere as well. I'd love to hear from you. So, Llewellyn, please tell me who you think your favorite speakers are, and as far as anyone else listening or viewing, post your comments as well.